For our Canadian lifters, pure passion, real results, what you put in your body should matter. Pure Vita Labs PVL supplements are clean, tested, and approved, powering athletes for over 25 years. They also power the KOTL podcast. You could trust PVL. Use code KOTL15 for partnership pricing at PVL.com. Pack Lapadat. I got my man's Eric Helms, and this is the Sheffield Recap episode. And my man, first off, right off the top, I'll tell you, this was the craziest event I've ever been to in my life. I've been commentating powerlifting since 2016, but I've been in powerlifting since 2008. And this was like nothing I'd ever experienced in my life. And that's people seeing the videos coming out. Man, it was crazy, man. Like 2,000 people flew in, bought tickets. We're here, man. This is what powerlifting is all about. And they're over 250,000 people watched it in like 24 hours.
Yeah. Big Z handing out trophies.
Big Z handing out trophies. That's true.
World champions and world record holders all on the same platform together, everyone competing against each other. Yeah, for anyone who's interested in kind of getting like the experiential feel, in addition to us talking about the recap, coming out, I'm not sure when this will drop, Ryan, but on Monday, Iron Culture episode, myself, Connor Heffernan, and Omar Isuf talking about the significance of the Sheffield, which is great because Connor's a historian. I was coaching, and Omar and Connor were in the audience filming and interviewed all the athletes. So it's I think it'll be an interesting and good companion piece to us talking about the competition itself from the sporting fan perspective.
It's historic, man. We're going to remember this. This is the first. You'll always remember the first, but being there live, I was talking about how it felt for the first time like legitimate major sport where, for instance, if a call was made that they didn't like when Gavin Aiden's squat got overturned, 2,000 people booed the decision. And it felt like you're at like a Bulls game or a Raptors game and a bad call and the crowd's like, boo, and like 2,000. It was like, holy shit. Like the crowd was invested in. Or if someone came out and they wanted them to do well, like you would see a France section stand up, like 35 people chanting and hollering. And they were like, or if a local lifter like Joey Namani or Mo came out, it was nuts, bedlam. Or when Jesus for his last deadlift, 2,000 people stood on their feet and started chanting like a soccer chant. And it, for the first time, felt for real like this is real sport. This is like we've made it to that level now. And people literally were flying in from other countries, buying plane tickets, hotel, purchased a ticket. There was programs on every seat with glow sticks and the smoke machines going off. And like when you took a look at the program and read it, it was like real. It was legit. We're here. It was wild.
I don't know if I told you this, Ryan, but you saw what the back platform area looked like, right?
Yeah.
So the hallway where we're all hanging out, where we did our weigh-ins and where you would chill if you were more than 3 out. They had a monitor there that was showing, the lifting from a camera as well as a scoreboard, just like they did in the warm-up room, down a couple of flights. And there were 2 moments in that hallway where we got the significance of the scale. One was when we were watching the very first squat and Evie goes out there, and on camera, you could see her look and go like, whoa, and just have this moment on stage in such a very honest, emotional reaction. And everyone started cheering for her when she came out because she's kicked off the competition. And one of the coaches, or it might have been Paul Marsh, or I can't remember if it was Paul Marsh or Panna or someone, they thought that the audio was on the monitor because we could hear the cheering. And he's like trying to figure it out. And he's like, no, the audio's off. And we all realized, oh shit, we're hearing the cheering coming through like 2 walls. It was so loud. And then Evie comes down after she completes her meet and her eyes are lit up. And she's like, oh my God. Like she was not even thinking about her second squat. She had been so shocked by the size of the crowd, the noise, and the spectacle of the event. The second moment was when I went out for Jess's opener squat, and I made the mistake of going to the coach's box and looking to my right. And it completely took me out of like, oh, I need to look at depth. Let's make sure she gets her command. Got to be an advocate for my lifter, ready to challenge it. Let's gauge how many kilos she has left. And I went, holy shit, am I at a rap concert? Like, what is going on? It's like three-tiered mezzanine, completely. I don't know if it's completely sold out, but it looked like it from the stage. And some part of my brain went, don't look at that. Look at Jess. And I'm like, okay, right. We're here to do a job. And it was pretty wild. I'll tell you what.
Gavin, I haven't dropped the podcast yet, but he said as he was walking, I was like, when did it dawn on you that this was special? Because he's like, it didn't feel anything different until I mean, days in, whatever, talking about it, doing interviews. Everything felt normal until he was walking up the steps and he wasn't even there yet. And he could already hear the crowd. The music was boom, boom, boom. And he could hear the crowd. And he's like, what the fuck? This is not normal. This is not like a powerlifting crowd, like that. And as he's walking closer and closer to the platform, it's getting louder and louder until he's on the wings about to go out. And when they see him, they pop and they're like, oh, and he's like, holy fuck. He hops underneath that bar and Gavin's playing into it. He's like yelling at the crowd. They're yelling back. And he's like, he goes, I felt it, man. You could feel the energy. He's like, if you were operating around 90%, it'll bring you back to 100. You're operating around 60%, it'll bring you up to like 70-ish. It helped because the energy was insane.
And you know what's wild, Ryan? And we talked about this in our private phone call. It's like this was an amazing success, but it's going to get so much better, which is wild to me when we think about how much, the SBD crew is focused on where do we go from here. So as much as it was an historic event, folks, and as much as it was a spectacle, and to every lifter who felt like, they were a rock star for a moment, it's just the beginning.
This is literally year one. And already the list, they've already accumulated and made on what they want to do for improvements and fix up errors they saw, like in the teams that they're going to bring on extra staffing. And it's going to be the same venue, but it's going to feel so much. It's all improvements all around, man. It's crazy. This was like the basement of where they're going to be. And it already blows the doors off of everything we've ever seen. It's freaking, I can't wait it just makes Malta that much more interesting and important because you got to get back there. You got to get back. Cause you thought year one was fun. Wait till you see year two. All right. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting. Now, talking about it and the spectacle of it, who for you, what was the number one storyline for you coming out of this?
For me, honestly, it had to be Evie. Even though Jesus' performance was literally the most impressive that we've ever seen in the sport of powerlifting, regardless of division, regardless of testing, across so many ways. He did like 5 historic things in one competition. For me, I was being, very cagey about what I knew about Evie's situation when I was on the recap show. So full disclosure, I've known for weeks that Evie was cutting down to 52s, and Ryan's got the receipts. I was telling him, I was like, hey man, you need to keep an eye on this. You can't share it. This is secret. Apparently, some secrets got leaked as you've talked about in your podcast recently. But I was like, Evie is a legitimate threat to potentially win this thing, even though she is currently ranked 12th and she's seen as the plucky regional pick. So I was really, really excited because I have a personal investment in a lot of these people. So as one brief background storyline, and I'm happy sharing this. And just to give you how much it meant to me, even though I'm not her coach, I'm just her friend and someone who's kind of been a close observer. When I found out Evie won, because it was a while before the last person who was attempting to move up a spot was finished, because she was at 52, so she was early in the women's competition for all of her lifts. I grabbed her, picked her up in the air, and I started bawling. I was crying.
You said on the podcast you cried.
I haven't listened to it yet, so I'll probably cry again when I listen to it. But I met Evie in 2018 at Calgary, where she was coming in just happy to compete at the world level and had only been lifting for a few years. And she really, not to speak for her, but going from I'm enjoying lifting, loving progress to I am now a junior world champion, she put a lot of pressure on herself and she struggled with that and had to kind of refine herself and refine her motivation, what worked for her, how to put herself in a position to succeed, but not hold herself to some kind of external standard and keep doing it for the love. And I think her coming back 5 years later and winning the most prestigious title, arguably, at least the inaugural Sheffield. I mean, some people might value the world championships higher, and that's fair enough. But this is a big deal for her to come back, and especially in such storybook fashion, being ranked 12th, coming in, surprising everybody, and just winning against the favored person who was everyone predicting to win, Noemi Olivares. Almost everyone. Tori ducked out on this because she, her predictions were, well, let's just say they didn't perfectly line up with reality, and she's not here to defend herself. So, like good honorable men,
that's right,
Ryan and I are going to make fun of her while she's not here.
That's right.
But no, but so for me personally, because of my connection, Kedrick Kwan is not only a friend of mine and a fellow New Zealand powerlifting coach. He's also doing his PhD with me. So I've seen him really come into his own over the last few years. I've been in communication with him for over 5 years, and he's now become one of the most respected coaches and powerlifting nutritionists, and for good reason. So he was guiding her. Jason Clark, I think he competed for the first time in an Auckland powerlifting competition with me in 2014, and was asking me questions. We were both in the 93s. And for him to go from there and now actually be one of the most respected coaches that are out there, and possibly one of the best coaches as well, he's very impressive. And I have the privilege of also being one of his supervisors for his masters. So both, Jason and Kedrick are students at AUT. They're furthering the science of powerlifting. They're amazing coaches. They're involved in the federation. They're really pushing NZPF forward. And Evie being someone who has had to really recalibrate and figure out, who she is as a powerlifter and as a champion powerlifter, and to not be expected and come and win. It was just too much emotion for me, man. I couldn't keep it in.
Yeah, it's a remarkable underdog story. It might be, let me ask you this, giving the magnitude of the event, the caliber of competitors, as well as the ranking that she was probably estimated to get, is this the biggest upset victory our sport has seen?
Yes.
I think so. I honestly, off the top of my head, I can't think of another more. If you could think of one, because obviously we don't have Vegas odds, but if anyone could think of a more, and it's got to be meaningful. Don't tell me about, collegiate Nats. This happened one time. Like, come on, this is the biggest of the big. This is Buster Douglas knocking out Mike Tyson level upset victory. It was crazy. And I'll raise my hand and say, I wasn't, even when I found out that she might be cutting to, or she was cutting to 52, I was openly, well, not openly because this was a secret, but I was saying this could be a disaster. We shall see. We've seen disaster strike when people do these like cuts from one class down. However, and you had articulated, she's got nothing to lose. Even if it's a disaster, she's supposed to come in 12th, and if it's a disaster, she comes in 12th. She won't lose ranking. She might have a worse performance, etc., but the risk-reward ratio was worth it. And I mean, look at the proof is in the pudding, right? She walked away with the big check, the biggest win, and it's crazy what she pulled off. And her Commonwealth total of 468. I get it. She wasn't a full-fledged 57, but she still had some kilos left to cut. She only dropped 8 kilos from that total. I mean, it's remarkable. 460 for a total as a 52 is crazy. Just a year ago, if you would have told me there'll be 52s doing 454 and 460, because hats off to Noemi Olivares with 454. 420 as a 52 is insane, world class. You're probably going to podium on wherever you're at. These 420, that's 40 kilos below Evie. That's not even close. That's not even ballpark. If Russell Orhe, 30 kilos up, beats you by 40 kilos, he's going to style on you in this Instagram story. A 52 to beat you by 40 kilos is is a spread as big as the Grand Canyon, and 420 is it's an amazing 52 kilo class total. It's very difficult for me to wrap my head around what those two ladies did. And yeah, both her and Noemi. And I'm glad they're only 6 kilos apart, because we got a battle coming. If you don't think Noemi is about as fierce as they come. She's nice the whole nine, you meet her, but when it comes to competition, ain't nothing sweet, man. That she's gonna be so fired up the whole way that this went down. Evie coming in, sneaky, cutting down to 52, and you're gonna upset the queen of the 52s, the two-time world champion like that. Noemi's going back home like, oh hell no. We'll sort this out in Malta. We're going to sort this. And Evie's found herself in a sports rivalry. And it's funny, like, I was talking to Noemi about, like, well, how do you feel about, like, trash talk and all that? And she's like, I'm game for it, whatever. I'm like, well, I don't think Evie's going to be trash talking. That's not Evie's style. They're so like, it's so funny seeing how sports rivals, the most unlikely of rivals in rivalries, take place. But my goodness, did they not push each other to the limit? Right up until, like, for everyone listening, we're doing a recap here. Evie going 9 for 9 in a perfect day, historic day. And Noemi Olivares, they went tit for tat, back and forth, right up until the final deadlift, where Noemi tried to pull 203, and finally one of them fumbles the ball. Up until then, we didn't know who's going to win. I thought, I asked Noemi beforehand, what do you think your total is going to be? And she's like, I don't know, 440 something. I'll break the record, but not, I'll break the record, but, and she went off, and I don't know if she just didn't want to show me all of her cards, or if she just realizing that the conditioning that Evie brought to the table, she just upped it. She dropped the hammer. Let's go. Yeah. And that's, people from France told me Noemi is that person. She will, if you push, she will drop the hammer, and she's going to jog faster, and it's a beautiful thing in sports when we see two competitors just pull the most out of each other right up until the very last deadlift. Yeah, man. What a freaking performance.
I remember what you said to me. You came down to the warm-up area and you saw what Evie put in for her openers, and you're like, is that real?
I was like, is this a bluff? Is this going to change? Like, what's going on here?
No fake openers. They're not, well, the deadlift they get changed, but they were, I predicted in my spreadsheet based upon the limited information I knew. Because obviously, like, once I found out, it's not like Jason and Evie were like, well, here's our attempts, because they weren't sure where Jess was going to end up or what have you. But I had her predicted in my spreadsheet at 455. So she surprised even me. She was 5 kilos more than kind of my, like, my relatively ambitious prediction for her, given the information we had. So no, she blew my socks off, and I think she blew the socks off of the world even more than me, since I had insider information. Man, it was crazy.
Usually that cut just murders, even if everything's like decent in training. She's like, well, I posted, she didn't post a lot, but even if you looked at some of the training footage of hers, it's like, yeah, but that's before this water cut. How many times do we see people have a water cut that doesn't work out? I mean, like, from when Michael C was in 2019 taking Taylor, like, was literally leading Taylor in the 2019 USAPL Nats, and then cramped up and was gone in the deadlifts, like, because of the cutting. Like, cutting, look, I don't got to look at Bryce Lewis. I don't got to tell you, you've seen it happens. It happens all the time. It's very common. So when I'm hearing about this, I'm just waiting the whole time. Like, when is that going to rear its head? The cut caught up to you, and you did amazing up until, and then when deadlifts come, even when deadlifts come, you're not safe. The cut just cramps come, and the cut, she was so lean, so vascular. You could see her leg muscles contorting and tensing and moving as she's shifting the weight. And when you're watching that, you're telling yourself, like, is the cut going to rear its head? And all of a sudden the day cut short, and you're like, well, it was good. It was fun while it lasted. Gave Noemi quite the scare, didn't she? But no.
Ryan, like, when you looked at the pictures of them on the steps of Sheffield City Hall, Evie, the next person who was taller than her, if you look in the lineups, obviously Tiffany Chapon, shorter, she's 47. All the 52s, well, the other 52, shorter. All the 57s, shorter. You had to get Leah Bavois And like that's where you start getting to the same height. So when you look at the heights, it was like Evie, Leah, Bavois, Jess. So a 69 and a 76 is like the height for this caliber of lifter. And the one other thing you could notice from that picture, even being, 30 yards away where we were taking pictures, is there was actually 13 women. There was the 12 who were there, and there's Evie's bicep veins. She was diced. As a bodybuilding fan, I could tell you that the only performance that was rivaling her 460 total was that of those bicep veins. Your girl was flexing on them, and that's how I spotted it early. Was I noticed she was putting up, as anyone who's shredded does, her accessory videos looking just freaking jacked, and I was like, okay. And that's what triggered me. Of course, I'm a bodybuilding coach as well as a powerlifting coach, so I had the eye for it. But yeah, it was she did a really good job. Her body was holding up. From everything I've heard, and I'm sure you guys talked about this on the podcast. I won't belabor the point, but she was not suffering, to hang around there. This wasn't like, oh man, I'm burning the candle at both ends of the stick. Sure, she was healthy, she was performing well, and the water cut was pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. She was walking around, sometimes less than a kilo over over the 52 target. So it was done excellently well.
Yeah, she said she ate into it and was eating around 2,000 calories
Yep.
for a 114-pound woman. Like that's not bad. She's like, I wasn't suffering. And again, yeah, it wasn't a big one of those hero cuts like Jessica Bittner would have as a 72, like some serious hero cuts. And that's what I was anticipating. Like, how much are you eating? What kind of a hero cut is this? It wasn't. Hats off to Kendrick. I mean, this is like, he did a phenomenal job getting her down there while retaining strength. That's the hardest part. Anybody can drop down a weight class, but you're going to end up like a bodybuilder, super duper, drained, and you're not going to have the strength to drop down and be strong. That's the science. That's when you're really going to earn your money as a nutritionist and not get too far over. So when that little bit of water cut happens, or get too nervous about the water cut, so you just diet them right down. But now you cut it too close, and now they're going to be drained strength wise. There is like a sweet spot, and it's tough. Sometimes it takes several cuts to sort it out. Sometimes, especially when you're an adult. Several times, more data points. It's very difficult. So for her to have done it and nailed it, and this is the first time out, usually it takes people, like I've done this myself, it takes like a year and like 3 or 4 comps. And then on the 3rd comp or 4th comp, you're like, now we're rocking and rolling and everybody's in trouble. But to do it, nail it, the very first comp, and oh, by the way, the very first competition is Sheffield. That's why, even when I found out and you told me in the DMs, I'll be honest, I was like, man, this doesn't, it's not encouraging, but it was high risk, high reward, because she had nothing. When no one gives you a chance, it's time to take chances. You got nothing to lose. And
so I agree. That's the storyline on the women's side. That's the big one, but it was not the only storyline. I mean, we came away from this from this flight with a new heaviest deadlift ever in the IPF.
Before we hop over, do a rundown of the women's, let's hop over to the men's winner real quick. Then we'll drop down. How you feel about that? Because I'll give you gave me your performance of the day. I think that's upset of the sport, and I think that's obviously an amazing performance. But I'll side with Jesus Olivares. The significance of Jesus Olivares. Also 9 for 9, just like Evie, didn't come without a little bit of tense moments, though. That last deadlift being ruled a no lift, and Grant Iverson from Team Flex, who was handling him, running over to the jury. And it was so I was praying to the gods of powerlifting, and they overturned it, and he got a 9 for 9 day. Jesus Olivares, this was the biggest total, period, ever in powerlifting. Period. There is no untested, tested, whatever. 2 hour weigh-in, whatever the fuck, however a weigh-in you want. Noodle bar, whatever. That man is not, he's the strongest man walking the face of the earth and the strongest man of all time. I asked Jesus Olivares, Jesus, who are some of your strength idols? And he's naming Eddie Hall, half Thor. And I stop him and I go, you're stronger than all of them. Let that sink in. Than they ever were. You're stronger than them on any given day. And it's like, I don't know if it's totally sunk in. It was literally, at what point when you're watching this performance by him, and obviously he squatted 470, so bench pressed 272.5 and deadlifted 410. So he squatted over 1,000 pounds, bench pressed over 600 pounds, and deadlifted over 900 pounds. Like those are some huge milestones to get all in the same competition. And while watching it, were you able to watch it actually?
Yeah, I was able to watch. So the way it shook out was that we were able to watch a good bit of the squat and bench because there was a 10-minute break and about 5 minutes of media coverage between events. And of course, then the whole men's flight went before the women's. So I got to see a lot of the squat and bench, and I got to see the very end of the deadlift because I had to accompany Jess for drug testing. So we got out in the middle of the third flight of deadlift. So I got to see the most hype moment in the whole competition of Jesus making his last pull and then standing there. For whatever reason, the lights were taking a long time to register, so the suspense was you could cut it with a knife. And then even more so, like two rounds of that on this deadlift because of the challenge. And that room to say that was electric would be, man, it was there was far more voltage than the word electric would imply. Let me just say that.
That's one of the times on the last deadlift when the refs on the floor called it a no lift. The boos around that arena, because everybody knew he was chasing history. Everybody knew it was tapping off 1,000 squat, 600 bench, 900 dead. And it was the biggest total we had ever seen. And this was the storyline coming in that he was chasing that and he would have seized it. And the boos around the arena, everybody was on their feet watching that final pull. And when you saw Grant jogging across that platform, it was like, jog, young man, jog, get to that table. And he was well received by the jury. They're like, no, yeah, we it's all good here. It was that if Evie was the greatest upset our sports seen, in my estimation, Jesus Olivares' performance was the best performance I've ever seen in powerlifting. And
I totally agree.
And he also, by the way, is now the leader in dots. Not all time. That Taylor's got him all time. But in terms of, when we're talking about Bob Matthews finished off 2022 ahead, Jesus Olivares hadn't gone yet. And Jesus is now nudged ahead of Bob and came on the podcast and openly said to all of those gentlemen, come over to the IPF. If you want to go at the king, I'm the king. There's only one now. I am the king on kilos, and now I'm the king on formula. And that is extremely hard to do when you're a heavyweight. And leading into Sheffield, months out around the summertime, I remember how many polls I would post asking people who's going to win this. Unanimously, it was Taylor. And having Jesus on the podcast back in the summertime, and he was like, look, I'm crunching my own numbers, what I think I'm capable of. And I know what looked like in South Africa. He was injured for South Africa and calls didn't go his way. But he's like, when I crunch my numbers and I think what I'm capable of and I see what the world record is, he's like, I think I could beat Taylor. And that's when he thought Taylor, we all know Taylor was injured. And then he ended up getting food poisoning the day before. So Taylor wasn't Taylor. That's fine. Even when Jesus was under the assumption Taylor would be bringing his A game, he's like, I still think I might be able to beat him. I still might be able to pull this off. So, and now it's not as crazy. We'll have to see. But
it was incredible. We had the privilege of Omar, Isuf, and myself interviewing Jesus before the competition. And it's something that'll be coming out in multiple different formats after the fact. But just really, really interesting interview. And big thanks to all the lifters who gave us their time and energy, especially right before such a momentous competition. But there's two things I really, really liked about Jesus' performance that I think are something that every lifter should pay attention to what makes a champion. One, he set a lot of goals for himself. He found a lot of avenues for success instead of letting his entire identity hinge on one single thing. He allowed himself a lot of opportunities to keep momentum moving forward psychologically, which I think is an underrated thing to do. He sat down, he talked about, I had to write them down. There were so many. He might have had a shot, probably the least likely out of all of them, of breaking the all-time squat, which I think is Ray's 490. He wanted to break the deadlift, which he did. He wanted to get a 600 dots, which he did not, but he was very close. I think it was like 595. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it was around there. I can't remember now exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very close. He wanted to win/beat Taylor, which was what he was talking about. He wanted to unseat the weight class pound for pound GOAT. He wanted to beat Ray's best total of 1112 and a half, which he did by 40 kilos. And he wanted to also, beat Dan. So he wanted to have, those are like 6 things that he came in for, and he got 4 of them. And he was just ecstatic about it. The other thing, the second most important thing, is that he has the humility and the intelligence and the tactical mindset of listening to his coach and letting his coach coach. He went 9 for 9. He took the right attempts. He didn't push his own desires for some of these goals on his coach and heavily influence the attempt selection. And I can't tell you how often I see at the highest level that the ego of the lifter can sometimes negatively influence the coaching call, and that collaboration can get spoiled. And that objective eye of the experienced coach who's seen so many lifts and studying you and trying to help you and is a little bit removed from the moment, at least more than you, could really help you maximize your performance on the day of. And they didn't sacrifice that for any Hail Marys on any of these additional shots. He went 9 for 9. And it's no surprise to me that both the first place winner in the men and the women's went 9 for 9, because at this level, it's not about who's the strongest. It is about who's the strongest and the best power lifter. And the more you falter, the more it opens the door. And we're at a point in powerlifting now where it is so competitive that you have to be strong and smart. And not all powerlifters are. And I think this is an excellent example. They could have potentially tried to take more on a few of those lifts. He could have, he was just short of a 600-pound bench technically. I think he would have needed another 2.5. I'm not going to take that away from him. But the point is
272.5. That's 601, isn't it?
Oh, you're right. My math is bad.
What games you playing? What games you playing?
I'm sorry. I was remembering 270. So ignore me. But they didn't try to go, oh, what do we need for 5 more dots points? Right. They were like, what's there? Because that's the smart money. And I think that was really impressive. And the calls were fantastic. The game day coaching was fantastic. The performance was fantastic. And the mentality, I think, was that of facilitating success. And we got to all be witness to that. And it could have easily been a scenario where, a Hail Mary here or there to get a slightly higher total to get the dots, or to maybe they're too aggressive on squats and, maybe went 465 on their second instead of 455 and then jumped to 490 and missed or something like that. So that didn't happen. And the fact that Jesus, who has been just scrambling to just get over 1,000, hits over 1,000 on his second, and then goes 470 on his third. It just shows you how strong he was on that day and how everything came together. And, I've seen some people talking about how the calls in this event are maybe a little looser than Worlds. And I think, yes and no, it depends. There were really fast bench commands. That's one thing I did notice. But there were calls on depth, There was an initial call on, I think, probably soft knees for Jesus's deadlift, and then the jury overturned after review. So I don't think this was necessarily the strictest competition, but I don't think we should say, hey, this was a loose competition. I think it was on par with some other events, maybe slightly less strict than others, maybe not at the world-class level, but this was legit. And it was pretty damn impressive, to say the least. And it was a very historic performance, and it was unintentionally extremely epic with the challenge. So it was wild.
It is, for anyone listening, this was international judges, so it was the same level of judging as Worlds. I liked the judging on this. Nothing too strict where people look like people are getting robbed. that leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth. I get it. Wow, great. It's super duper strict. The last thing you want is people are getting needlessly robbed, people leaving squats going 2 for 3, 1 for 3 when they all looked good. Nobody feels good about that. So I thought the judging myself was bang on the money, pretty good. And you're going to have controversy no matter what. Looking at the men, so if the women's was tight between Evie and Noemi, the spread between Jesus and the gentleman, quite a bit bigger. However, the battle between Jonathan Keiko and Gavin Aiden and the battle of the 93s. Now, these two had battled in 2021 USAPL Nats right down to the very last deadlift. And this was a close one as well. And it could have swung, but kind of a segue here in terms of the judging. That ended up being all the difference, where Gavin Aiden, it's the opposite of Jesus. He got his squat world record, 336.5 kilo squat, had a massive celebration on the platform. The crowd was about 2,000 people roaring his name, and you've never seen a guy drink it in quite like Gavin was when it came to the crowd. And moments later, it gets overturned by the jury. Now, that was heartbreaking enough for Gavin, but the bigger picture, and Jonathan Keiko obviously missing his third squat as well, 302.5, but Jonathan lost 2.5 kilos because his second squat was 300. Gavin lost a big chunk. That was 11.5 kilos. And that 11.5 kilos ended up being huge for him. When the story unfolds, he ends up with an 880 and Keiko ends up with an 884. That last squat was pivotal. That taking away of that last squat was pivotal. Had that squat stood, not only would Gavin have gotten the world record in the bag that goes with it, but that could have been the win. He would have had 891.5. Looking at Keiko, who knows? Keiko's a battler. I'm not saying for sure, but it'd be difficult for me to see where they would have got those kilos out of, because he failed his third squat. It wasn't a technical thing. I don't know where he would have caught up if Gavin had got that call. That is going to be difficult for Gavin looking back. And he was super upset. Goes into very big detail on the podcast about he got in a brief altercation with Taylor Atwood, because it was Taylor Atwood's coaching staff and he apologized and said, look, it had Taylor had nothing to do with it. He actually smoothed it out with the strength guys as well, but it's the strength guys who had protested the call, and it cost him. It cost him greatly. And I don't know. What did you think about the battle in all of it? We're trying to unpack it.
Yeah. So the squats, I got to watch the full session before I really needed to get into the warm-ups for Jess and for bench. And I'm going to be 100% honest. And let me preface this with saying, Gavin, it was great meeting you. I respect you. I think you're a good man, and I only want to see the best for you. And I'm going to share my honest opinion, and it's not meant to be offensive to anybody. But it is honest. And when I saw 336 get called, I thought it was a huge mistake. The only number that made sense to me was 331.5, chipping the world record. I thought it was closer to what was probably there. I knew that Gavin had to do a pretty large cut, and you don't fully recover from that cut until you're, after squats typically, sometimes even to bench, or even as you were saying during deadlift. The record was 331. The distance between second and third is $5,000. The record amount that you get is $5,000. And ultimately, in the end, if he had gone 331.5, he would have totaled 885, which is 1 kilo more than Keiko had. For Keiko to, get that back, he would have had to have pulled 345, just 2.5 less than his PB on his last deadlift. And as we know, Keiko was strong. It's probably good to go 100% on his bench, but he wasn't at the strongest we've ever seen Keiko. And I'm not sure, based upon his last deadlift, he could have pulled 345. And I think that decision to put 5 more kilos on the squat than was necessary to break the world record, each one of those kilos cost him 2,000 pounds. And for me as a coach, and I'll be honest, I was in the warm-up room with all the other coaches and athletes, when we saw 336, we all looked at each other and went, oh no, why would they choose that number? And I get it. Maybe they thought, look, we need to get every single kilo out of them. We need to get, like, if we think 336.5 is the max, we're going to go for it. But with all due respect, typically as Gavin gets heavier in squats, he's more likely to cut depth. And when I saw the squat, I thought that's high. That was my knee-jerk response when I was watching the video. I didn't get to see it from the side, so that's not that clear. But to me, it obviously looked high. Not egregious, but if I was a judge, I would have red-lighted it. So when it passed it, I was like, whew, lucky guy. Like that high squat didn't get spotted, And then when it got overturned, I went, well, I mean, I would have challenged it. If I saw it and I was the coach of someone else who is potentially battling for one of those top 3, top 5 spots, and the format of the Sheffield, it incentivizes challenges. This is a huge money meet, and everyone is competing against each other. And every spot from 1st to 10th is the difference between as much as 12,500 pounds to as little as, quote unquote, little, because this is a lot of money for powerlifting, 250 pounds if you're down at the bottom. But let's be realistic. Gavin on a bad day is still placing top 6 probably. So we're talking about thousands of pounds on the line here. And in this case, battling for that top 3 spot. So I personally, Ryan, from the money perspective, and even from the risk versus reward, the only number that made sense to me was 331.5. And when it didn't go up, the pits in my stomach. I felt bad. And I was like, that is an error. And there's not much that can change my mind on that. I understand they wanted to go higher, but with the cut, the fact that he cuts depth, and what was on the line and how far they probably need to extend, it was the wrong call.
Well, it obviously, as we've seen, it didn't pass, and it cost them. It cost them dearly. It's, talking to him, he is obviously extremely confident in his abilities. So, and I don't know all of, I think he was mentioning the biggest squat he had hit in training. I think he posted it, and I think it was 327.5. But, and that's not a crazy leap to what they loaded up. I mean, some people do those kind of jumps from training to platform. It depends. It's tough. I know he consulted with his coach, and their logic anyways was, we're going to build. They didn't know what Kaiko was going to end up. And I think everybody kind of overestimated what the opposition was going to end up doing, like how far their totals might be, especially with all the hype. So I think they thought, if we don't at least end up somewhere around 336.5, we're out of the game. And for a guy like Gavin, who is extremely confident and literally as all in as you get, he's like, drop the hammer and throw on what you think I need if we're pacing to win. And if you have that conversation with him as an athlete, are you sure you're going to be able to hit this? Are you sure you're going to take it to depth and all that? It's going to be yes, yes, yes. Throw it on. I know what you mean. I get where you're coming from. The analytical emotions out of it. And you would be like, listen, if I look at you historically speaking, the weight gets heavier, you get a stitch higher, and we can't afford to miss. But then I also could see where they would be like, if we estimate 890-ish, whatever, we're out of it if we don't do this. And if you tell Gavin that, he's going, well, then load it. he's going to. If they're doing the numbers like, we think Kaiko will be around here, Gavin will be like, well, then we know what I have to do. It's I don't know. It's tough.
I'll walk back my statement by 1 degree. I can think of one scenario where I would have done what they did. And that would be if I legitimately thought that Gavin Aiden had a shot at winning the whole thing. Because going more than I would need to get a $5,000, payoff for the record, to potentially go for the 12.5 grand difference between first and second, sure. But it's basically the equivalent money from going from second to third to getting a record. So it's the kind of thing where the downside, if you don't do it, and it's when you're fighting for second or third, it's roughly equivalent, you know. So it's yeah, the
I
risk
should.
versus reward math didn't make out for me. But if I were legitimately like if I was Gavin's coach and maybe they did feel this way, you know, we've got a shot at winning this whole thing. You know, if I see Jesus crush 455 and I still think, yeah, we got this. We can beat Jesus. If that's my headset as Gavin and their coach, and maybe that's where they were at, then the call makes sense.
I
But
should
that's the
also
only
add
scenario.
this: they didn't. Gavin openly said, "I don't care about the bags of money." In terms of like the trade off with that, like I understand where you're
Fair.
coming
That's
from.
fair.
Yeah, yeah, and that makes sense. If that was a factor, and it's like, okay, you're going to risk this bag for that bag. Do you understand that this doesn't work out the math? But Gavin said, I don't care about that. That won't bother me. So throw that out. It's all about we need to max out, and he wanted to get the biggest possible total, and possibly defeat Keiko, get a little revenge on that. And I mean, we're going to see. And let's talk about Keiko too. I don't want to focus too much
Yeah,
on Gavin, but
100%.
so Jonathan Keiko missing his third squat, and I was a little surprised. You don't often see 2.5 kilo jump in the 93s. Probably was thinking about a bigger jump, a bigger third attempt was the plan. And after the 300, they probably had that conversation where it's like, I'm not sure. 2.5 kilos is still 2.5 kilos. Do you come out for 2.5 kilos? Well, they see Gavin putting in a big squat. And if they have this conversation, you only got 60 seconds. They're like, look, we're not doing what we thought we were going to do for our third squat. But if Gavin hits his third squat, we are in trouble. Like if Gavin hits this, and Gavin did for a second, and Gavin got it, you might come out for that 2.5 kilos because it might come down to that 2.5 kilos. But he misses, and we're not used to seeing Keiko miss. For Keiko to miss that early was a little bit surprising. All is not lost, and this is powerlifting, and Keiko's got a heart like a lion, comes back for the bench press. And if you're wondering, though, at that point, is Keiko slightly diminished, slightly off form? It looked as though he took a smaller third squat than he would have been anticipating and still missed it. But Keiko, being Keiko, breaks the world record bench press, and he looks no worse for wear on his face. If he was at all stressed, he wasn't showing it. Maybe Gavin having missed his third squat overturn helped reinvigorate them. And then going into the deadlifts, Gavin Aiden's previously in the deadlifts, this is where he starts losing ground. He's a subtotal guy. And usually in the deadlifts, he starts big time losing ground. At the World Championships, missed his second deadlift, came out for his third and got 335. But for Gavin on this day, 340 kilos flew. That's 750 pounds. That is a really good deadlift for Gavin Aiden. And for Gavin to hit that, and it flew. It actually looked like he had maybe another 5. They wouldn't have known that because historically speaking, this should be a grinder for Gavin, but it wasn't. Obviously, looking ahead at Malta, holy smokes, this is going to be interesting to see what Gavin does. But Jonathan Keiko, that famous shot of Gavin leaving the deadlifts and hyping himself up, is celebrating his final pull. And Keiko had 342.5 loaded. And this was a 5-kilo jump, which would nudge him ahead to 884. And obviously, Keiko back to the wall, as scrappy as they come. And Keiko, as he always does, his batting average when it comes to a battle is so high. Only in South Africa did he miss. I mean, he's been so good for so long, and he talk about rising to the occasion. Keiko did what Keiko does and got that third deadlift and solidified himself as once again the number 193 in the world. And it's a good comeback story for an honest, good guy in Jonathan Keiko. Now, I want to get your thoughts on that performance. Also, holy smokes, man, when these guys battle in Malta at the IPF World Championships, add in Gustav Hedlund, add in a prime because Emil Krastev was injured and essentially out of it, and showed up trying for the bench press world record, and it wasn't going to happen that day. And Amar showed up trying for the squat record. He could have done it in any other days, but that day, no dice. And some of these people showed up injured, and it's Sheffield, you're not going to not go. But what were your thoughts on the 93s?
Yeah, it looked to me like Keiko was on bench and he was at 99% for his squat and deadlift, and that was enough on that day because of the way the chips fell. Gavin pulled a 5 kilo comp PR on his last deadlift, and that they made some great calls. Honestly, besides the squat, the temp selection was on point. And
Agreed.
Gavin had a great day. I think it's worth pointing out. He equaled his best total. And Kaiko was real close to his best. So they were right there. And I think Kaiko had to pull 5 kilos less than his best, so he was good for it at 99%. And Gavin had to extend and did, but just didn't extend enough. So I could see this easily flopping the other way. I think it's also worth pointing out that Gavin's very young, and he's got a bright future. And it may get to the point. My prediction is that Gavin's going to start to be untouchable pretty soon.
You think so?
I think he's. I mean, if you just think about it, he's gonna. I think he's gonna get wiser. He's gonna get more experience. He's gonna get more seasoned. He's 24, and Kaiko is absolutely right there and still getting stronger. But he's and just in terms of longevity, he's 30, and he might have another good 5 to 10 years of being at his peak. But I do think we haven't seen Gavin at his peak yet. And I think wisdom is going to be the thing that really pushes him into the next level. And I'm not saying he's not wise now, and I'm not being disrespectful.
Wisdom is an experience, and you only get wisdom.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying. I think he's going to be more and more of a threat over time, and I think Keiko is a huge threat, extremely consistent, and what you're getting. You're going to get him in peak form, ready to come to battle, and he's going to be extremely tough to beat. But there is a point where I think, and I tell you what, Jonathan Keiko is probably one of my favorite, is my favorite male lifter besides people I coach. I love Keiko, and we had a really awesome opportunity to connect in this competition. So big shout out to Jonathan. Thank you for your time and your vulnerability and your honesty in your interview. I had a lot to relate to there. So I wanted to see Keiko. I wanted Keiko to win the whole thing. I'm not going to lie. And it was awesome to see him really maximizing what he had on the day and making the right calls. That deadlift was what he needed. And I don't think we were surprised that he hit. So yeah, as regarding the rest of the battle of the 93s, Emil Krastev, I think, you asked me on the podcast, like, hey, who do you know in Bulgaria? What inside information do you have there? Yeah. Which was funny. I couldn't elaborate, but Kedrick is actually his coach right now. So I had some inside information, and because I wasn't coaching anybody on the men's side, I was openly, advising and collaborating with Kedrick on what to do there. And Emil is going to be a force to reckon with when he is fully healthy, because he was struggling pretty badly with some injuries and really struggling to hit depth, period. So from what Kedrick told me, he was hoping for a 280 squat. He was hoping for a 320 deadlift. And they got more than that. They got a 287 squat, which is not the best we've seen from Emil, but it's really, really good considering what he's been dealing with. And what they came there to do was to put the best deadlift and squat they could on the platform, and then take a shot at the bench record. And they did. It just wasn't quite there. And they knew it was going to be close. Having seen some of Emil's training, he'd hit 230 pretty convincingly and just missed 240. So it was a question mark of, do we have the world record? And we'll have to see on game day. And then, who's got a lot, who's going to go for a little bit more. And it ended up being Keiko's day on the bench press. But that they came there to do exactly what they wanted. They had actually a very similar story to Jess, who was, when we looked objectively at the placings, we're looking at best case scenario. If it is a bloodbath, like I thought it might have been, it wasn't on the women's side, a little bloodier on the men's side, that maybe she could have, squeaked her way into 8th, 9th, or 7th place. But hey, we wanted to at least be in the top 10. We knew if we did our job, even if everyone else did their job, we'd be in the top 10 in one of the money spots, and we get a shot on the world record for one lift. Same position Emil was in. He didn't get the squat, the bench world record. Jess didn't get the deadlift world record, but he did, sneak his way into the top 10 among the best powerlifters on the planet while hurt. So hats off to Emil. Great meeting you. And I think even though it didn't look like he was in the battle very much, given the circumstances, he did a great job. And I think we're going to see some impressive stuff in coming years.
Emil's best is thus far 877.5. So Gavin at 880, just to show you how close they are. To further your point as well with Gavin, he picks up more experience. If he gets that third squat, which he keeps missing, we're into the 890s or beyond. I mean, there's room on the deadlift, so he could go up more on his deadlift. Now he knows, oh, this is where my deadlift's at. Yeah, now you start seeing the pathway for 900. It's going to get oh, by the way, let's add Gustav Hedlund, who did 880 at Swedish Nationals. These guys are all so close. When 884 was Keiko's win here at Sheffield, and these gentlemen can all hit 880 and up. It's going to be extremely tight in the 93s. Let's talk.
Can I just say, when weight cutting does get solved, things happen that are quite good. And, Evie's performance is an example of that. And let me just say, when you've got someone who is just hovering above 93 and they can total over 900 in training and they get their weight cut right, good things happen. I'm not going to name any names. Bryce Lewis. Yeah. But things are coming down the pipe. That's all I got to say. Yeah,
I know. I want Bryce to enter the fold as well, former world champ. Yeah, let's see what happens, man. The 93s are stacked. And there's rumblings of people coming over from the USAPL. We'll put a pin in that and just see how it all unfolds. But if Brendan Petrie comes over, holy freaking smokes, the 93s are uber stacked. And we're going to have a battle at USAPL Nationals, battle at Powerlifting America Nationals, let alone you get to the World Championships and the rest of the world's there. It's going to be amazing to watch. It's also going to be a shame some of these guys won't make it to Worlds. Yep. That's a shame, but it is what it is. Some people got to look back at USVI and be like, you still accepting? Because let's try to get an America A and B team when it comes to the 93s anyways. I want to talk a little bit about the 105s. Now, Emil Norling, a little hot cold at the Swedish Nationals. He hit a 928.5, and which is an amazing, I think 937 is the world record total by Anatoly Novopismani. So he was within 10 kilos of the world record. Comes out, opening squat, pops a hamstring, ends up missing his second and third squat, and all of a sudden the other 105s smell blood in the water, and he is all types of vulnerable, Emil being the reigning world champion. So Michael Davis, the world silver medalist, and Mo, Abdul Majid Suleiman from Britain, the hometown kid, being the bronze medalist. The fight is on. Michael Davis doesn't miss any of his squats, goes 2 for 3 in the bench, but only leaves off 2.5 kilos. So it wasn't a major miss in terms of the bench press. And looking at the deadlifts, it appeared as though he might be pacing himself for the upset to beat the reigning world champion in the 105s, get a level of revenge there on the biggest stage, and just couldn't complete that 365 or 804 pound deadlift, the final deadlift. And if you put $1 million on the table and said, you got to guess which way with this million, I would have said he was going to get it. And in a day that Emil was very much human, and so beatable. I mean, his total took a major hit, especially because it's due to injury to popped hamstring. That was the day it was going to happen. But Michael Davis just couldn't pull it off with that last deadlift. And Emil Norling, 375. And the deadlift is just so reliable for Emil, even with a torn hamstring. And I'm not torn completely, but when we saw him at the banquet and we were walking from the shuttle to the actual banquet venue, he was hobbling. He was legitimately visibly hobbling. And I remember catching up to him and saying, like, are you all right? And he's like, oh no, there's something wrong. So I don't know. Hopefully Emil is good for Malta and can defend his world title, because these gentlemen are going to clash along with the other 105s of the world. But a hell of a show, tons of heart, tons of grit. And even with a torn hammy, or partially torn anyways, Emil Norling pulling 375 and securing the win with that, missing his last deadlift. He didn't need it. But yeah, it was close. And then Mo from Britain finally getting that 900 kilo milestone that he's been chasing. And for his last deadlift, loading up 391 kilos. That's a world record, not only in the 105s, that's a world record for the 120s. And that's a huge weight class jump from 105 to 120s. That's a huge level up in terms of world record. The crowd popped when they seen how much he loaded up. He had 900 kilos total already secured, so that was a milestone for him. But instead of, and what was that jump for Mo? It was 21 kilos. So instead of a 21 kilo jump, I mean, he was trailing Michael Davis by 12 and a half kilos and trailing Emil Norling by 15 kilos. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, Eric?
Mm-hmm.
If we go to the World Championships, he doesn't make a 21 kilo jump. Let's say he only makes a 10 to 15 kilo jump. And let's also say the subtotal is a little better because he missed his third squat. He did a pretty big jump from 325 to 337 and a half. What if he went to 330 instead? Now that's 5 kilos less he's got to pull. He's a threat. And not just a threat to podium. He's a legitimate threat for the world title if Emil Norling's not 100%. What was your impression of the 105s?
It's the Rocky story, right? You know, there was a last minute dropout. They call up Mo. Hey, hometown hero, he's got a shot. He doesn't win the 105 battle, just like Rocky doesn't win against Apollo Creed. But he shows everybody, I am a legitimate contender. And he gets his respect. And if he had gotten that 391, he would have shot up the rankings, and it would have been not quite on Evie's level, but pretty close. I think he would have ended up in in sixth or something like that, or fifth maybe. So I think he would have been right behind Taylor Atwood, which is pretty shocking. So no, it was an impressive battle. I see it in very much the same way as you. I was very impressed that Emil came out and not only pulled 375 with a popped hammy, but then went, let me go ahead and try to move up a ranking and above the rest of the 105s and start battling with the other people and putting 382 and a half on there. You know. And these guys left everything out on the platform. Like you said, I didn't see Emil hobbling to the banquet because I had to leave early because we had some more filming to do in other parts of the UK and Ireland. But I did see Mo after the competition. And I don't think he's like properly injured. So I'm not saying that. But he was pretty beat up too. He was
injured actually. Yeah, he was. Yeah.
He thinks he's going to be better in weeks, you know, and maybe even less time. But I wish everybody the best of health from Malta because I think we're going to see a very exciting battle in the 105s.
Would you have loaded that 391, or would you have seen? I myself,
no.
in the moment, it was pretty cool and gutsy. And if you actually thought you could pull off, and he probably was feeling the vibes. You know what it's like. We were just explaining how electric it was, and you're the hometown kid and 2,000 people, and you're like, you know what, we're loading. But if it's me, I would have said, let's load up and just beat all the 105s. And you could actually beat the reigning world champion with 15 kilos loaded. Because if I'm not mistaken, Mo was the lightest of the 105s. So he just needed to tie. So he just needed a 15 kilo jump, not a 21 kilo jump. Now, would he have gotten it? I don't know, but it's still 6 kilos less. You know,
So I would have been looking at it because it doesn't like placing at the Sheffield. It's not about how much you weigh compared to the other 105s. It's almost like an unofficial win. It is where are you at relative to the world record. So I would have looked, okay, I've already seen Kyoto finish all of his lifts, right? He finished on a 300.5 attempt on his third. I've also already seen Michael Davis, you know, try 365. So I would have done an attempt change. You know, I would have put in a placeholder for the last deadlift of you know, something pretty high to make sure that I had last say, put an attempt change and saw what would I have needed to move up 1 or 2 placings personally. And, you know, based upon how 370 moved, he might have had another 10, maybe 12 kilos in there. I'm not sure if he had the full, you know, 15. But it's certainly, I thought that was more realistic than 21 kilos. So
I see. Yeah. This is where you're right. In terms of placings, it wouldn't matter with body weight, etc. But I legitimately would have meant a lot to me to beat the reigning world champion. It'd be a hell of a story. Anyways, this
is why you sit down with your athlete as a coach and you go, okay, what are our goals? You know,
right.
And if it is place as high as I can in this competition, and then, you know, take a shot at X number of records, and then you set it up that way. So I of course am not critiquing Mo's decision or the coaching, because that might have been what they sat there and said, hey, if we got a shot at beating the other 105s, let's do it, even if we don't think it's going to happen. And then fair call, you know. But if it had been me at the lifter and the coach coaching myself in some kind of weird cloning scenario, then that's what I would have done. So yeah.
Let's I know we're a little bit pressed for time, so we'll skip it along a little bit. Let's talk about Delaney Wallace, who finished at number 4th. Holy smokes. I had alluded in the preview show, Delaney's he's talking boastful. I seen in the DMs where I showed the DMs where I said to him, I would die if you broke the world record. And then he said to me, my man, you better buy life insurance. And it turns out, I mean, he was pacing well. He was hitting PRs throughout. And we all knew he hit 822.5 in 2021, but never could return to form. Even return to form for 822.5, let alone surpass that and show improvement until Sheffield. And it all finally came together for Delaney. And he was pacing for PRs, PR'd squat, PR'd bench, went up to the deadlifts. And the last pull, when you knew after he's pacing like that, he's going for it. And when he already hit his second deadlift, solidified 835, to jump to the final deadlift. And this is Russell Orhey's final deadlift. For so long, nobody thought anybody was really a threat for Russell Orhey in the 82.5, 83 kilo range. He always would be winning with a decent spread. It was a stacked division, 2 through 5 or whatever, but Russell was ahead. Delaney Wallace came within 2 inches of taking Russell Orhey's world record. It was an impressive performance. It let everybody know, look, whatever he was trying to figure out previously, he figured it out. And that record is definitely in danger at Malta. And I definitely think he's going to load it up, and he might have to, because in the crowd, Jurins was there, the local Brit, the European champion, whom just a week earlier totaled 820.5 with room to spare. And I mean, a good chunk of room to spare. Both him and Delaney can go 830 and up at the World Championships. It's going to be an amazing battle. But a nice bit of redemption to silence some of the chatter by Delaney, because people were openly asking, will he ever return to form? Was that a one-off? Was that a fluke? What were your thoughts on Delaney?
I loved it, and it was great chatting with Delaney. He is honestly one of the most genuine, nice, caring people I've talked to, and I got that sense from him immediately. You can tell when it's real. And he had a great day. I know he wanted to break that record. He wanted a little bit more. But Delaney, if you're listening, I hope you were really proud of your performance, because you had meet PRs on all 3, even though you didn't get your last deadlift. That was the first time he's ever deadlifted 330 in competition, the first time he's ever benched 200 in competition, and the first time he's ever squatted 305. So that is, I mean, that's the unicorn day, and yeah, it would have been the icing on the cake to have broken the world record and, got a little bit more on that deadlift. But to say that he improved and to say that he had a good meet, I think is still an understatement. He really is now showing himself to be a legitimate contender for the best, 83/82.5 in the world. And it's going to be really interesting to see what the future holds. And it was awesome to see him fighting for that top spot, or among the top spots.
Like previously, Russell would be winning USAPL Nats on a bad day and still have a spread. But Delaney is one of the gentlemen out there in the world where it's like, look, if you have a bad day and you're waiting in the wings and watching me pull my last deadlift, you might lose. Russell isn't usually in that situation. Delaney could put him in that. Delaney can put his back to the wall and beat Russ. Has got to be at 100%. And I expect Russ to have a massive 82.5 performance at USAPL Nats, but it's true. Like Delaney showed, I belong. Another one of those proven stories there, one of those proven grounds.
And I want to see Russ come over. I think he needs competition because, now he's looking at other weight classes and hanging out on Instagram, talking crazy. Like that's he's clearly one to drive him, and he's looking at like anywhere forward at this point and taking it's turned into the meme of and I took that personally from Michael Jordan. So let's get the man some competition. Come on over, Russ. Come to the IPF. Spend a little less time on social media and have like a legitimate battle with Delaney. We all want to see it. It seems like you need it. And I think it would just be better for everybody.
Well, he's I mean, in USAPL, he does have Jamar, who did 832.5. Delaney's moved up the rankings slightly more than Jamar, but he can settle it with Jamar and then settle it with Delaney, because by the time USAPL happens, Delaney might have taken his record. And then Delaney's like, look, I took your title. I took your record. Well, you sort it with Jamar, hats off, respect, but then you know where you're coming. Right? Because I'll be the last man standing then. If he'll want to, they'll have a score to sell anyways, and they're both flex, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And it'll be a showdown where Russ is not going to trash talk Delaney, and Delaney is not going to trash talk Russ. So if you want a silencing of the trash talk with, I know you're not a big fan of it, Eric.
Hey,
That would
no,
be.
I have zero problem with trash talk.
Oh,
I
really?
think, yeah, I think there is it just needs to be in the spirit of sport. Not just it needs to be about sport, not personal things, but in the spirit of sport. And I'll leave it at this because I don't want to derail us. Agata Sitko clapping for Jess during her third deadlift that would have beat her. Not hoping for her downfall or anything like that. She got athlete of the month for that. That is the spirit of the sport and the spirit of powerlifting. I'll leave it at that.
But does it change your mind when I think she was on the Sabato Boys podcast? Hopefully I'm not misquoting, because I think the Sabato Boys told me is what she said. And they're like, "Why were you clapping for her?" And she said, "Well, it's probably gonna be the last world title she wins." So
You got to see her. You got to see her out. You got to clap as she goes away.
she like, because next year.
Can I
And
just say I love Agata Sitko? She is
dude,
amazing.
she's amazing.
Yeah.
She's such a nice person. She's an easy hang too. Like, she just doesn't mind. She'll follow the crowd and just hang out, throw in her comments, and like, it's hard not to like Agata. Looking at the men's, let's talk briefly about Taylor Atwood. Look, it wasn't, because we got to jump to the women's before we run out of time here. We're kind of all over the place, but Taylor
Actually,
Atwood,
real quick, Ryan.
yep,
So
yep.
we're okay with trash talk and powerlifting now, right?
As long as it's sports. I'm with you
Okay,
on
so
that.
so can I talk my own shit and just say,
Okay.
hey, I almost perfectly called the men. Can I just say that?
Did you really? Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Who did you
The
get
only
wrong?
so I expected Gavin to not do as well as he did, but be because maybe being a little too aggressive, which sort of happened on the squat, but it didn't happen on the rest. I said, look, I think Taylor's hurt, and I think he's going to be middle of the pack. I think you asked me, hey, can you give me the counter argument to why Jesus is going to win? And I said, look, I don't need to give you
That's
this
right.
made up hypothetical. I think he's going to win. I think
That's right.
Jesus is going to take the whole thing. And then I said, I think Keiko's going to be in second. So I
You're
called
right.
the first two, and then if you just potentially swap, a meal with Gavin, and I nailed it. Just want to talk.
That's right. Well, yeah, we'll get
And I
Cody.
also said I don't think Kyoto is going to be able to repeat what he did at Japanese nationals.
Yeah. So rounding out the men, and we could talk about the win. And Taylor was injured.
Yep.
And it turned out he had all types of injuries. He's starting to show videos now where he had a 600-pound squat in the gym, and it was a grinder.
Yep.
So this whole time he was heavily injured coming in. He knew. And then if you were around the hotel, you found out he missed a day because he got sick with food poisoning. The day of, he was talking like, I'm back on my feet. Don't worry. I'm the food poisoning's gone. I think I'm going to crush it. That was just him turning on being an athlete, trying to almost will it to happen. When you see that and the athlete tells you that, it just means he's tough and he's trying to will it. It doesn't mean it's necessarily true. Let's see what his body actually says, because the mind and the heart are like, Taylor is a dog of dogs when it comes into a fighting. But missing his third squat, the bench was decent, and then missing his third deadlift and, finishing off on fifth place. Even injured Taylor, 777.5 that's a great total for a 74. Other 74s are emerging though. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we do have to get to the women's before we run out of time, but in the 74s, we've seen a couple other 74s in the world now, total 750, 760 and up. And we're 10 weeks away. If they start approaching Taylor and Taylor's still injured, and he was injured, Worlds is going to be very interesting it could be another bloodbath. Taylor, it's dicey. It's tough. I don't know what's going to happen.
Taylor's in a new era. We had some really good conversations, and they were, until Taylor tells me otherwise, they're private. But I will say from my side of it, without getting into any details, Taylor is in a new era. He and Bonica were the oldest athletes in the Sheffield, both at 34. But 34 is still not that old in powerlifting. Look no further than Dave Ricks. And I think that Taylor is going to find, he's got a baby boy, adorable, cute as a button. He's got a different perspective as a man and an athlete now. And I think he is going to find a new way of doing things. He's going to heal up. And I think we're going to see another arc to his career where he is still the top 74 and does some things that amaze us all as a more mature athlete. As he gets more experience and he figures out what he needs to do to still be at his peak despite this new era for him. And honestly, the more I've gotten to know Taylor, the more I've come to respect him and see him more than just what he puts out. The confident, best of the best, power lifter. And I really can't wait to see him actually succeed and come back from this and have a redemption arc that is, just a beautiful thing to see. And I really hope he's healthy at Malta, and I hope he surprises everybody.
He's going to need to be. Guys like Austin Perkins are rumored to be coming over, and the other 74s of the world are all catching up quickly. So Taylor's got some for really real opposition in the second half or the third act of his career. So it's going to be interesting. He can pull, if anyone's going to pull it off, it's Taylor. The guy's a workhorse as well. And he's got a great team around them, and they're fully dedicated to him. Briefly, Kyoto, who hit 712.5 at Japanese Nationals a week before, unable to do so here, hit 685. The deadlift wasn't there. He had a decent squat. The bench press wasn't there. He only got his opening bench press, and the deadlift wasn't there. He only got his opening deadlift. So he started off looking like he might actually pull this off. He might actually pace. He might actually break the open world record. And certainly top end strength, he has it in him. Not going to happen on that day. Probably too quick of a turnaround being 1 week, as well as the travel, which is insane from Japan. But look out for Kyoto in Malta. And in Malta, by the way, several nominations are going to come in the 6 kilo class for 700 and up, 710 and up even. It is going to be an absolute barn burner of a weight class in Malta at IPF Worlds. Can't wait to watch it. Eddie Berglund didn't have the greatest day, almost bombed out on bench press, but eventually hit his 195, saved himself, and with a respectable 730 total. And we previously had Amar Khanan missing that squat world record. I want to jump into the women's. Jad Jacob versus Joy Namani in a battle of the 57s lived up. A couple notables here. First off, Jad Jacob finished off trying for that 186 squat, missing it, getting her opening bench press, and missing 100 kilos twice on her second and third. And I believe it was depth. Was it not? If I remember correctly.
That sounds right, but I'm not 100% confident on that.
And she's capable of 100 kilos. The strength is there. She just needs to sort that out. But she lost 7.5 kilos in the bench press that would have been towards her total. Her total, by the way, if you're wondering, 503.5. Throw 7.5 kilos on that. Holy smokes. She missed her third squat. 6 kilos left on that. Throw 6 kilos on that. Jad Jacob is capable of possibly floating around a 515 to 520 kilo total at the World Championships if things go her way, if she could sort this out, and I think she can. But a 503, and it's not often, as a matter of fact, for the first time ever, we saw somebody take Joy Namani's deadlift record and Jad Jacob pulling 231 kilos. An absolutely phenomenal deadlift on Jad. Jad is a triple threat in the squat, bench press, and deadlift, and leaves as the number 1 57 in the world, beating the reigning 57 kilo world champion in Joy Namani in a sensational battle and taking third. Now, Joy Namani showing up and for the first time wearing a belt, wearing knee sleeves for the squat. And let that be an indication she knows gone are the days she can lose kilos on her squat by not wearing a belt. Natalie Richards is coming from the US. Jad Jacob is already here. She needed that belt. Now, how much did that belt help her? Well, off the bat, she threw 5 kilos on her squat and went up another 5 kilos, but missed it. Maybe she's still getting used to that squat with the belt. It looked a little bit untidy. It looked a little bit uncomfortable, but still threw on 5 kilos. And she also, by the way, just competed a week earlier at the British Nationals. Not sure why she did that, but she did. She's a gamer. She's also a dog. All types of strong. And one of the all-time greats. 2-time world champion in 52 and 2-time world champion in a 57. So Joy Namani missing her third squat, 3 for 3 in the bench press, and making a big push. Second deadlift, 230.5. Jad Jacob rallying back to take the deadlift world record off of her, and Joy coming out to 234, which would have nudged her ahead, missing it on the day. But what happens when Joy Namani's fresh and didn't compete just a week before? We're going to find out in Malta. And oh, by the way, let's sprinkle in Natalie Richards if you like the 57s. The 57s in Malta is going to be a phenomenal showdown. Jad Jacob can make improvements. Joy Namani can be fresher. And Natalie Richards, who I believe is still a junior as well, her peaking, soaring in training. What are your thoughts on the 57, sir?
It's going to be very interesting at Malta. And Jad Jacob did great. The squat wasn't there. She struggled with 2 benches. And I'm not trying to, share stuff that she wouldn't want to share, but I'll just say she was, after the bench was over, emotionally, she was not in a good way. So huge credit to her for coming back, because I've seen many, many lifters who, once they have a rough day on either one lift, they just can't get it together. And that is not the case here. She rallied, she came back, she broke the deadlift world record, got herself on the podium, and had a very impressive performance. And, I had her predicted, although I didn't get to share because I had to go early. I saw her in the top 3. Jad Jacob, Noemi Olivares, and Evie Corrigan. I suspected were going to be the top 3, and she got there despite struggling on the bench pretty significantly. The good news is you only lose a little bit of kilos on the bench, and she still got 180 on the squats and had a phenomenal battle with Joy. It was crazy to see Joy come out wearing a belt and sleeves for the first time, and I was not fair enough to Joy on the predictions. She did much better than I expected. It was a legitimate battle. Both of them went over the world record, and only 3 kilos spread between them. And, like you said, slightly better day, not having recently competed, and it could have gone the other way, and we could have seen, a third, fourth kind of position for both of them and a little bit of a swap. So it was a very impressive battle. Joy had both of them had their best day on the platform yet, if you look at the total. So talk about a battle there. It was really impressive, and I'm excited for Malta.
Coming in 4th place, did this surprise you? Amanda Lawrence breaking the squat world record with a 246.5, finishing bench with 130, and taking the biggest deadlift of all time in the IPF, 268.5, hitting and leaving with a 645 kilo total. Amanda Lawrence looked like she's returned back to form, had a phenomenal day. A beautiful 9 for 9 performance. And this is what she needed to kind of right that ship. She's been a little bit inconsistent. I think Gavin Eden had mentioned on the podcast, he was talking to Amanda Lawrence. And Amanda Lawrence said, you know what? I'm tired of holding back. I'm going all in. I'm going all in on all these. And when she goes to Worlds, expect her to go all in again. And we're going to see Amanda Lawrence go full tilt. And the World Championships is based on good lift points. Now, last year, Turbo Tiff took that. Amanda Lawrence has won the World Championship best lifter twice. We got to bear ourselves a bit of a battle here. Amanda Lawrence, reinvigorated, motivated at the World Championships and healthy. She is a threat for the best lifter at the World Championships, and returning to form is the queen. What were your thoughts there?
Oh yeah. So this is where I think my calls for the women and the predictions were most wrong. And that was for Amanda Lawrence and also Bonica, who we'll talk about in a second. I both thought, they just don't seem to be at their peak that we've seen previously. And they both came in and proved me very wrong and really showed out for themselves. And it was a joy backstage because the platforms were set up. There was 4 of them and had 3 lifters per each platform. So it was Bonica, Amanda Lawrence, and then Jess all on the same platform. So I got to see them, and I was like, oh, their warm-ups are moving well. So Amanda was strong as shit, and it was awesome to see her go out there, go 9 for 9. I mean, maybe objectively the most impressive performance out of the women. If we take the storyline out of it and the fact that Evie cut to 52, 645 total with the heaviest deadlift of all time, squat world record. It's incredible. Amanda Lawrence crushed it, and I think she jumped from 8th to 4th by making that last deadlift call. If I recall correctly, it was something bonkers because it was a very, very tight spread in the women, as Rory alluded to. The top 8 all broke the world record. And the difference, if you look at the percentage of world record scores between Amanda Lawrence and Jad Jacob and Bonica Brown and Joy Namani was less than 1%. So she leaped in the placings by getting another 7.5 kilos on her total, 4 places. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't think she had 268.5 in her, but there was no question when she did it. It was definitely challenging, but she locked it out. You know, sumo can be very fickle. She held it. And I was just in awe that we weren't going last. You know, this is the first time in a competition where Jess is, you know, not the last deadlifter. And that was really awesome to see.
Man had slid in my DMs after she heard the preview show, and she was like, you guys are wrong.
You're sleeping.
You guys are wrong. And I'm like, it's okay, because we'll eat our crow in the recap show. And that's what I always tell all the lifters when they hear preview show and they don't like the preview. I'm like, don't worry, we will eat the crow happily. And here we are, Amanda. You proved us wrong, and we're eating crow. Well done. Can't wait to see you at Worlds. Let's talk about Bonica Brown. Bonica, a huge 280 on the squat, a big 147.5 on the bench press, and going 9 for 9 with a 252.5 kilo final deadlift, finishing with 680, another world record fall. Bonica, already the greatest 84 plus of all time, winning world titles in and out of equipment, winning the world games. A sensational performance by her, great handling by Shell out of Norway. They got some big scraps coming in Malta. So Nita's coming and everybody's super duper excited about it. Well, we'll turn it into a preview show, but 680. I mean, that's a hell of a performance. And anybody who thinks they're going to unseat Bonica without a battle, they got another thing coming. It's going to be a great scrap in Malta at the World Championships. And Bonica is scrappy. She's a scrappy competitor. I remember at the USAPL Nats when she was swapping back and forth, battling for that record, and her last squat, halfway up, she's yelling, "This record's mine. I'm going home with the record." When she's pressed, she rises to the occasion. So we'll see what happens. But what were your thoughts there?
I was really impressed with Bonica's performance, and that, again, also eating crow on her. I thought, hey, she's coming to do this squat, but she hasn't posted any benches, and she's cutting off the sides of the plates on deadlift. You know, we're probably going to see someone coming in doing what they can on the other lifts and taking the squat world record. Boy, was I wrong. She broke the squat world record on her second attempt and then went 280 full send and got it. And then had a great day on bench and then tied her best, I think her best deadlift ever before this might have been her best on platform deadlift to date. No, I'm wrong. She tied her best deadlift that she did previously. And that actually might have been single ply. So this might have been her best raw deadlift. So I was wrong 100%. She was on point, 9 for 9, and really crushed it. And like I said earlier, you know, her and Taylor, oldest competitors in the competition, and she's clearly not done, and she's not going anywhere, and she's hungry. And I think it's going to be a while longer while the queen reigns.
Turbo Tiff coming in 7th place. So Bonica was in 5th, Joy Namani in 6th. Turbo, I talked to her afterwards. Now, Turbo Tiff missed 161 in her second attempt, rallies back, and usually when a lifter changes her ritual or his ritual before a lift, that's a bad sign. She always grabs her belt, starts digging in her heels, and it's the same every single time. When Turbo Tiff missed 161 kilos for her second attempt, which is a world record, and they loaded up for her third, and she came out and changed that pre-squat ritual, I thought, oh, wow, the weight's in her head. What's going to happen here? But Turbo Tiff is scrappy. I mean, she's a scrappy young lady. Got 161. The bench press, only got her opening bench press, tried for the world record in their second attempt, just like she did for the squats. Missed it, but this time when she tried it again on her third, couldn't hit it. Going into the deadlifts, 165, 172.5, which I believe is a personal best, and then failed to hit 177.5. Turbo Tiff, I use air quotes here, settling for 428.5 for a 47 kilo woman to be getting 428.5. And if she had gone a little more conservative with a couple, she would be in the 430s. That is insane. She is so far ahead right now, the pack. Now some people can catch up. Jessica Espinal, the US, is a phenomenal lifter. Maybe she catches up. I don't know. But Turbo Tiff is, I talked to her afterwards and she was disappointed with only 428.5. That's how competitive Turbo Tiff is. Your 2022 world's best lifter. What are you thinking there when you saw that? I mean, obviously, they thought she would have a little more in the tank based off the attempt selection and her impression afterwards, but 428.
She's still a junior, Ryan.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. Like you were talking about how a 420, 430 total is world-class elite in the 52s. And it is, you know. So, I hope that she is able to see, hey, I actually broke the world record. And while I didn't have the ideal day, I didn't get my second or third, bench. I mean, she still came away with a squat world record, a total world record, and just an amazing performance. And she's not at her peak. So I think there's going to be a very low likelihood of any other 47s touching her for at least the near future, in my opinion. I suspect that she is going to be just on the up. So I was very impressed, even though she didn't, have a perfect day. Like you said, slightly less aggressive. Maybe she'd just gone for the bench record on her third. She's right in that tough range with bench where you're strong enough not to just go 2.5, but you're not quite strong enough where that's not unreasonable, which is crazy for a 47. Most of the time in prior years, you go, okay, you're a 47 kilo lifter. We know what you're doing. We're going 2.5 on bench, period, because that's just, but to be benching nearly 100 kilos at 47 is just kind of mind blowing in the first place, right? So, I mean, she's doing more than twice her body weight on her opener. Like, what the hell is going on? So it's pretty nuts, and I suspect that world record is probably going to get broken again in Malta.
With the bench rule in place, still benching twice body weight. Like she's a freak athlete. She's an absolute freak athlete. Let's move on to another freak athlete, Leah Bavois. Now, we had suspected she was a little bit injured. Definitely was a little injured, but still a 211 on her squat, breaking the world record in the squat event. Moving on to the bench press, hitting a 115. And in the deadlifts, on her second deadlift, hitting 222.5, missing 234.5, and getting a world record total in the 69 kilo class of 548.5. So Leah, not quite at 100%, but not exactly, still the best 69 kilo lifter in the world. And definitely bypassed Chandler Babb in a head-to-head showdown, Chandler being the two-time reigning world champion. And Leah Bavois, not only the best in the world right now, but the best all time in the 69 kilo class, 63 kilo class. And if Leah can get back to being 100% healthy, and I think she was on her way, just needed a little bit more time. Well, she's got the time now. And I'm definitely confident she's going to return to form come IPF Worlds in Malta. And I'm expecting the 69 kilo world record. If she wants, because Sheffield will still be based off of world records, she can full send that and just take it for a ride. Or possibly she just nudges it up, secures her Sheffield invite, and gets ready to collect the bag. But a full steam ahead, healthy Leah Bavois, whoa, let's see what happens.
Yeah, man. So Leah, this is a shout out to you. I'm going to eat half my crow, but not all of it. So funny story. So Ben Esgro is a good friend of mine. And for those who don't know, Leah and him they are coach athlete, but they're also together. And so I was looking forward to meeting Leah. And Ben Esgro and her come out of the elevator, and I go up and I hug Ben, and I look over and I say, "Hey, Leah," and she goes, "I know who you are," and just gave me this mean mugged face, like, "Oh shit." And I was like, "Okay," and I had a conversation with Ben. So she was not pleased with me expressing doubt in her being the incredible athlete she is, and we had a good talk about it. We're cool, but yeah. At the end of the interview that we did, me and Omar with her, she looked at the camera that I was holding and said, "I can squat more than 200 kilos, Eric." Because that's what I said. Hey, she missed 200 in her last Instagram post, and I was wrong. She came out. She actually broke the world record, right? And did so at almost 3 kilos underneath 69. She weighed in at 66.3, and she's coming back from an injury. I think she's just like, if both Taylor and Leah kind of had a similar arc to this story, she's just a little ahead and also didn't have food poisoning. So she had a great day. But this is not Leah filled out in the 69s or at her peak. So she was not fully recovered. And I think if she had been, we're looking at a very different conversation where, Tori was right. And maybe Leah, has taken this whole thing and shows us the most dominant performance in women's IPF powerlifting period. But she wasn't quite there, yet still good enough, coming off of an injury, 3 kilos under her weight class cut off, to break the world record, not only in the squat, but also the total, and be right in the running with everybody else. So hats off to her. I was half right. And that's all you're going to get out of me, Leah. And if you want to mean mug me again in Malta, I will take that mean mugging, because, it is what it is. I got to hold on to some of my dignity. And no, but very impressive performance. And I was, like I said to Leah, my predictions were what I thought would happen, not what I thought should happen. And I really did, want the best for her. And I was really pleased to see that she was on the upswing and had a really good day, considering that it was not too long ago that she was struggling with injury.
Chandler Babb actually ended up struggling, only getting her opening squat, only getting one bench press in, and doing the proper thing for her final deadlift, loading up for the world record. This is why she's there. She could collect the bag, make history, but loaded up for it and literally was KO'd on the platform. It was a little bit scary, but scrapper she is. She left it on the platform. Did not have the total she want, 520, but come Malta, I'm expecting her to be in a lot better condition. I'm not entirely sure what was going on, if she has some injuries or whatnot, but it is what it is. Let's talk about the 76s. I know you got to leave somewhat promptly, my friend. So the 76s, Carlina, and I was talking to Rory. He said his travel was 2 days to get there and 4 different flights with 4 different layovers, or 3 different layovers, sorry. So, and then when you get there, there's also, a bus ride or whatever, like a couple hours. So a massive undertaking for New Zealand people to get there. Carlina missing all of her thirds and finishing with a 593.5. Now her world record in the 76s is 600 kilos. She told everybody, or I can't remember, she told me in the DMs or she put it in her stories, but she's coming for her third attempt in Malta and she expects to get those. Malta's not going to be much more kind though when it comes to the travel. So we'll see if she can make the proper adjustments. Those people, when you're coming out of New Zealand, I don't got to tell you, that's the roughest. It is what it is, but it's not going to change come the World Championships. So in a day when Carlina, let me tell you, so in a day when Carlina is vulnerable, unfortunately, so is Agata, who showed up injured. She essentially showed up for the bench press world record, missed it on her. She was opening with it, which is a gutsy move. Missed it on her opener, missed it on her second, got it on her third. Asked her about that attempt selection. She thought she's going to bench press a heck of a lot more. So they didn't actually think it was a gutsy, bold move. But the depth on bench was an issue. She ended up solidifying it in a very dramatic fashion, getting the world record, seizing the bag. And that's essentially why Agata was there. Her total 556, which is a phenomenal total, but a good 30 kilos or so less than her full send, which she could do. Hopefully she's healthy for Malta, because if she is, holy smokes, are we going to have a hell of a battle? And then there's Jessica Bittner, and I'll let you talk about that. But Jessica, on a day when Carlina, 593.5, a little vulnerable, and Jessica has hit 585, but she would need some things to go her way. And of course, you didn't know Carlina was going to be vulnerable until it all unfolds. So it's 2020 hindsight, but there is reason to believe the reigning world champion come the world championships. If you see her stumble literally and fall at Sheffield, you'd be foolish to counter out at the world championships. And I think the battle of 76 is going to be pretty good at the world championships, because these ladies are close. Tell us about it.
Well, I will give a high level overview, because we're going to have myself and Jess on KOTL not too long from now, and we'll get the full story. But we can go a little over. I messaged my next meeting. We can be 5 over. So I'm happy to kind of give you, we're finishing, because we talked about Bonica, we talked about Amanda Lawrence. We'll finish with the battle of the 76s. And it was a battle that it was interesting, because all 3 lifters were struggling with something. One thing I will say is I think Agata and Eddie Berglund, they demonstrated what IPF depth is going to look like on the bench. And I think it makes sense. And I hope this is the way it is continually judged. And they both scared the shit out of everybody and only got their third bench. So we had no bomb outs, thank God. And yeah, we were all, again, here's what I think, spirit of the sport. We were all sitting there trying to help Agata figure out what she needed to do to get her bench. We were talking about adjusting grip width between her attempts. Okay, how about you try, retracting your scapula a little more? How about less arch and all this? And she put together. I think the thing she ended up doing was changing her scapular position and then letting the bar sink a little bit. And she tried it on her second, and she got a little out of position. They had an up down, and then third came in and nailed it and smoked it. So we're probably going to see her. I mean, she's right on the borderline of depth, but I really do hope she can get her bench back up to what it is. Because I mean, on the old rules, she's approaching 160, bro. So
Yeah, she needs that if she's gonna.
yes, she does. She also needs to not be hurt. I think that was also part of it, because it's not like she's not a well-rounded lifter. She's just an incredible bencher, but she also has a very respectable squat and deadlift. So yeah, Gata had a rough day. I was really pleased to see that she did get the bench record, even with just one attempt. And I hope, that the roughness of the day is made a little better by getting 5,000 pounds. Am I right?
Right.
And you guys, I was very cagey, didn't say anything, but the plan for Jess the whole time was we're going to run our own race. You know what? We're going to put together the best total we can. If the squat world record is open for us to take, we'll go for it. But we don't want to risk your total, and we also don't want to risk, your fatigue. And because what we're really there to do is take a shot on your own deadlift world record. So the plan was, based upon how that second attempt moved, and if Carlina did exactly as I expected and broke the squat record on the second attempt, then we could chip it by 0.5. And we hemmed and hawed in the 1 minute we had, but based upon how 215 moved, I thought she had 5 more, maybe 7.5 more, but I did not think she had, and she didn't think she had. Neither did Garrett Bentley, 224, which is what we would have needed to go. And if we had, and we had got it, that would have been pretty cool, because as we all unfortunately saw, Carlina did not get her third, but did break it on their second still. So Carlina was not quite at her peak, as we've seen, to be understandable, to be sure. I mean, dude, I was in the UK and Ireland for 10 days. It was 2 days ago, the day I left, unfortunately, where I first got a full night of sleep. And I'm like, perfect timing. I'm no longer jet lagged. Let me fly all the way back to New Zealand.
Yeah.
11.5 hour flight from London to LA, and then another 13-hour flight from LA to Auckland. So let's just say it's a challenge when it's actually the same time. You just swap the AM and the PM. Great. That's as hard as it could possibly be. So yeah, no, Carlina had an excellent performance. And it's funny, Dom, her coach, was like, if you'd gone 266 and got it, you could have jumped her in placing. And I looked at him like, bro, I'm not gonna risk trying to go up one placing for €250 and not get the world record and make it even harder. But to Jess's credit, she had a great day. She's a gamer. She had to hold her squat for like 12 seconds when her knees were not locked out before she got the squat command, and still got 220, which made me even more glad that we didn't try to take that 224. Bench press, she'd been having elbow tendonitis and a little bit of ibuprofen and some strong adrenaline. No issue. She tied her best. And then we did exactly what we came to do, put her in a position to take the shot on the world record. And due to a combination of factors, and I'll let her tell the story. Unfortunately, she grayed out on the deadlift when it was just below her knees. Might have been in there, not sure. But let me just say that it was an excellent performance. I'm very proud of her. And she went 8 for 9 and took a shot on the world record. What else can you do, right?
Right.
And she snuck into the top 10, which was awesome.
And come Worlds, we're gonna have a hell of a battle in the 76s, my friend.
Yes, sir. And we're ready for it.
I appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. Tori had to bail on us, and my man stepped up. And I would love to do more in the future. And I'm going to see you in Malta, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, sir. I look forward to it.
Okay, listen, everybody, on whatever platform you're listening on, please do subscribe. Let us know your thoughts on the recap, and post it up in your stories, and we will repost. Until next time, 6 Pack Lapadat, 6 up. Be around.